Hey everyone, and welcome back to another lore video. Today we're going to be delving into the nature of the Shadowlands. What are they exactly, and how they may be a bit more than what we would think, based on how it's currently represented in the game, because
the lore has a lot more to say about the Shadowlands, and much of it has really interesting implications for the story of World of Warcraft. And stories like this, they're inspiring. They galvanize our interest in the game and what Blizzard's doing. The power of a story that's well told is remarkable, and that's where a course that I found on today's sponsor, Skillshare, comes in. My link gives you 2 free months of premium, so with that, I think you should check out Storytelling for Leaders by Keith Yamashita. It is about using the power of story and using it in your life. So currently I'm running a games company, and as a part of that, I've got to communicate our company story, like what we're doing. I've got to do that effectively, and not just when I'm, say, pitching for funding. I've also got to be able to expertly lay out the vision and the purpose in a powerful way to rally the team and focus on our mission. Now, Keith's course is very digestible with actionable steps that will have you coming out the other end knowing how to effectively communicate your ideas. Now, Skillshare, of course, is an online learning community with thousands and thousands of courses, and the first 500 people who sign up through my link will get 2 months of premium completely for free. So check it out down below. Massive thank you to them for sponsoring, and let's get into the video.
So in a recent lore video, I talked about the nature of the Emerald Dream and how it's intrinsically connected to Azeroth herself. Chronicle 1 tells us that the Emerald Dream is not actually a Titan creation. Instead, it's what happened when Freya gave Azeroth's natural dream form. So the Emerald Dream as we know it was created from something that was already there. Now that's kind of interesting in that the blueprint of Azeroth that we know now is actually partially based on Azeroth herself's dreams. So that's kind of cool. I guess Titanforged were kind of making the planet in her image in a way, which is kind of interesting tidbit. But Chronicle 1 also describes the Shadowlands in a very interesting way, saying that the Shadowlands are essentially the opposite of the Emerald Dream. Well, in that case, is the Shadowlands something, therefore, that essentially comes from Azeroth herself, just like the Dream did? After all, they're supposedly opposites. Here's the Chronicle passage. Like the Emerald Dream, the Shadowlands are tangentially linked to the world of Azeroth. Yet whereas the Emerald Dream represents life, the Shadowlands represent death. They are nightmarish realms of labyrinthian spiritual planes teeming with the souls of the dead who have passed from the world of the living. The origins of the Shadowlands remain uncertain, but they have existed ever since mortal life first arose in the physical universe. Many believe that mortal souls are drawn to this place at the point of death, where they remain forever after. Still, others hope that their souls will go to a brighter place rather than languish for eternity within the cold confines of the Shadowlands. When a soul is called from the afterlife, it is free to roam the material realm if it is not restrained within moments of its arrival. So this opens by positioning them as opposites that are of the same kind. Kind of, 2 sides of the same coin. One life, one death. Now, the descriptions of souls here are not dissimilar to spirits from the Dream. It's just a different twist on it. And there are numerous dark implications here. Note the line, many believe mortal souls are drawn into this place at the point of death, where they remain forever after. Still, others hope their souls will go to a brighter place rather than languish for eternity within the cold confines of the Shadowlands. Well, this is an extremely important line, because in the lore of Warcraft, souls, they're just a thing, they're a part of a being. Where do they go? Well, for a long time, I think we players just assumed, oh, they went to the Shadowlands, which was some sort of afterlife thing. Well, this clearly tells us that it's not the case. The Shadowlands is an aspect of the Titan Azeroth, and it's the aspect of her that represents death, and souls are drawn into that naturally. Now, indeed, we see many beings such as Bomsamdi who, indeed, they provide another place for souls to go. What they are kind of doing here is they're demythologizing the Shadowlands. They're describing the mechanics of how it operates and what it literally is, rather than the spooky thing us players have in our head. Now, once we understand those, then we can talk a lot more about what the Shadowlands actually are. Now, we know that the Emerald Dream was shaped from Azeroth's natural dreaming by Freya. Do we have to suspect that the same goes for the Shadowlands? As this passage says, the origins of the Shadowlands remain uncertain, but they have existed ever since mortal life first arose in the physical universe. So the Shadowlands have origins. Indeed, we know that the Shadowlands is based off an aspect of the Titan, but this kind of suggests that the formalized Shadowlands that was created at some point when the Titan existed, but before life, which implies that something created them. Perhaps the Shadowlands were created by, whatever power created it at the time that life was created, knowing that life would eventually be sucked into the Shadowlands for some spooky reason. Basically, though, this is a clear point where they could unveil a new villain or a plot twist about the history of Azeroth. So, the Shadowlands and the Emerald Dream seem to be both formalized constructs that derive from the natural wandering mind of the Titan world soul Azeroth. The Emerald Dream was made from that by the Titans, and the Shadowlands seem to be made from that, but just from an unknown origin. Now, of course, that's just Azeroth. Argus is going to come into this video soon, but first, we need to talk about their in-game representations. So, the Shadowlands were really represented in the same way to the Dream until very recently. The Shadowlands were just a black and white filter on the regular game world with a new skybox, while the Dream was just a green filter that was used over the regular game world. Now, canonically, this matched, how they both kind of bleed into the material plane, but it's true that Blizzard just had no content for either of them. The Shadowlands is just where your character went when they died, and the Dream was just something that was used from time to time for quests. Well, with the Legion expansion, of course, the Emerald Nightmare raid, meant that content within the Nightmare, or the Dream, had to be made. So while the Shadowlands is kind of sparse in-game, that's just because Blizzard have not had a reason for us to go there and do anything. Indeed, the Shadowlands, as described in parts of the lore, they would have room for an expanded portrayal in-game. Remember the end of the Emerald Nightmare raid, right, where we go to the heart of the Dream? That's a place that doesn't map onto Azeroth, and it seems to be at the very core of the Emerald Dream. So when we travel around the Nightmare raid, that's done through the Dreamway thing, which again is another construct that does not map onto the real world. Now, the same could very well be done with the Shadowlands. Okay, it's time for Argus. Remember how Argus was basically tormented and maddened? Well, I think this kind of supports my theory, because Azeroth communicates to Magni through images that are often natural feelings, like say a sunrise. Now, it's pretty clear that the Dream is decently close to her, and that maybe that's a more whole part of how she works. She thinks in terms of natural things, and aspects of life and death. Maybe that's just how a Titan works. Well, clearly Azeroth is tilted more towards life because of her past experience. Sure, she's had a few very close calls, especially right now, but the Black Empire was destroyed, the old gods were long suppressed, and she had a pretty good run of it for a while. So life and death are core parts of a world soul. Azeroth is tilted towards light, and that's shown in how Magni communicates with her. Well, when Magni traveled to Argus with us, he heard Argus, and Argus did not at all sound like Azeroth.
So much agony here. So many voices, it's nearly overwhelming. The voice is alone, weak, but so beautiful. Ugh, he's fighting through the pain.
So if whatever the Shadowlands originated from is a part of a Titan world soul, then perhaps the dominant part of that for Argus was the death side. We need only look at how Magni perceived Argus's cries. They were essentially the opposite of Azeroth's. Well, Argus, internally at Blizzard, was actually referred to as Death Titan. That's what his in-game file names are all are. Then when you look at his abilities, they're all about souls. And then you look at what he did for the Legion. It's kind of dark. He accelerated the revival process of the Legion's demonic army. He seemingly used souls as fuel. After all, we see the Legion harvesting souls all over the place. Well, do you know what naturally sucks up souls? The Shadowlands with Azeroth. The Shadowlands were based off Azeroth, the World Soul. Now, this all culminates with Argus being able to cast End of All Things, which, according to the tooltip, just ends creation. I'd like to see the advanced tooltip for that one, Blizzard. But yeah, let's think about Argus, though. He was being used by the Burning Legion primarily to destroy the Void. Now, obliterating Azeroth was a part of that plan because killing her was kind of a scorched earth tactic. It would mean that, the Void wouldn't be able to corrupt her if she was, blown up. Now, what could be really useful when fighting the Void, Force of Madness, being resistant to the Void. So let's go back to the Shadowlands. When a soul is called from the afterlife, it is free to roam the material realm if it is not restrained within moments of its arrival. Now, who does this happen to? The undead. The undead have their souls partially dragged out of the Shadowlands and imperfectly attached to their bodies. As covered in a previous video, Blizzard seem to have this be the mechanical reason why the undead are very resistant to the forces of the Void. I mean, just look at the Lich King and all of his friends. The whole area was made out of the blood of Yogg-Saron, Saronite, and yet just Yogg-Saron did not have control. That's kind of wild. And really, when you think about all this, especially with the souls being sucked into the Shadowlands, It seems like a really horrible thing to happen, yet it is just a natural part of a Titan. And it does make Titans seem like inherently neutral beings which just exist, unlike the naturally evil Void and the naturally, authoritarian good Light. With, the good being in air quotes there with the light, and the Titan seems to be properly grey, having both life and death at their core as aspects. We're often referred to the children of the Titans in-game, which kind of decently reflects our agency and their agency. After all, the Titans woke up in a universe full of void, light, and chaos, and they had to make their own way. They can go good, they can go bad, and I'm sure they've made some fairly morally grey decisions along the way, and perhaps even a few cover-ups. And if you think about pantheons, like ones sort of like what the Titans were inspired by, a lot of the, old pantheons of the Earth mythologies, like say the Greek, they were a lot more morally grey. Those, they were actually characters and personalities that were fallible. Now, when I bring up this real world stuff, I'm not saying there's like an intended moral lesson here. I'm more saying that the work of Blizzard is derived from, some ancient cultures whose, the religion was doing its religion thing, but it was also sort of designed around like cultural, moral norms. So that's kind of where the work is derived from when we start talking about, Titans, which are clearly, inspired from various pantheons. Now, the lingering question of all this, though, is the Shadowlands, because if Freya created the Emerald Dream from Azeroth, did another Titan create the Shadowlands? Maybe there's a Death Titan that we're just not aware of. Perhaps there's another force of death out there that we're not aware of. It doesn't seem like it just, popped into existence based on the description, and indeed, it's implied that, it appeared like at the same time the Mortal Life appeared. So it's probably going back way before the Black Empire, before the Titans even came across Azeroth, back when the planet was just a world of chaos and madness. So there you go. Basically, the Shadowlands are pretty spooky. They are kind of an opposite, but very similar to the Emerald Dream. There are some very spooky parallels with Argus, and I think it's a really interesting topic. The Shadowlands are really important. I think they're going to be really important in the future. They're key to some of Sylvanas' story. One of Odin's eyes is in the Shadowlands right now. We've got Muzala, we've got whatever big spirit Odin traded his eye to that was found in the Shadowlands. There's so much stuff that's been hinted that we just don't know about, and as much as it seems like WoW is just going to be old gods until we all, pop our clogs and kick the bucket, I'm pretty sure that, they can't just do Titans for 10 years. I think that's going to be really important. Anyway, there you go. That is just some of my newest lore ramblings and discoveries. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.